Welcome to the Real Recovery Show. We air every Friday at noon, and we're super excited to have you join us here today. Today's topic is on Christianity and recovery. A lot of people, when they think about their higher power or a God concept, if they go to a traditional 12-step program, we'll see the word God on the wall, and some of them will have a story that they don't want anything to do with that, and some of them will have a story that they're good. They don't need to evolve that concept or anything. Some come from an organized religious background in their childhood. Some have an aversion to it because of something that happened, and they might have judged their whole experience with the organized religion based on that experience that they had. Everybody innately has a God consciousness, whether they choose to call it God or not. Everybody has a gut feeling. Everybody has intuition. But we can get so disconnected from that as we start relying more and more on our egos, on our stories about who we think we're supposed to be. And so over the years, oftentimes when people would go to a 12-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or anything, in the part of it and the steps in 2 and 3 where they have to find what really is their higher power and whether or not this concept that they have is something that they feel can restore them to sanity, that's when the questions start to really come up about whether or not they have a higher power that they could rely on. And I feel like it's a little bit of a shame that organized religion gets a bad rap in traditional 12-step recovery. I love the inclusivity of all 12-step recovery that allows for people to find a higher power of their own understanding and allows for them to really fine-tune it and to explore it and to do whatever it is that works for them. But oftentimes you'll hear people talk about how this is not religious, this is spiritual as a program. And while that is true, it's not anti-religion. So one of the things that's really good about 12-step recovery as well is that it can be applied to any particular addiction or affliction. It could be to a mental illness. It could be applied to codependency and any kind of substance abuse, gambling, anything. And that's why there's a myriad of 12-step programs all set up, all based on the same 12 steps. But a really cool program called Celebrate Recovery also is based on the tenets of the 12 steps, and but takes it and really expounds on it with using the Bible to correlate with the 12 steps. And that's really great for people who either want to get back involved with the religion of their upbringing or to explore a higher power in that way as well, maybe even for the first time. Sometimes when people do this 12 steps, they come in with their church going, they're part of their religion, and they go to the 12-step program and they think they got it. They already know they have a higher power. They choose to call God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, etc. What ends up happening is they don't necessarily have a relationship that they can rely on this higher power, but they feel like it's all good. And sometimes that becomes their block. I personally know one person who goes to Celebrate Recovery who feels like the God part of it is good, but does not have a personal relationship with their higher power in that way, and has recently revisited that to go deeper and to make sure that they're really having the spiritual awakening that we all know that we need when we go through our recovery. So this is really exciting to have. We have today, we have Dan, who is the lead care pastor at The Crossing. He is also the ministry leader at Celebrate Recovery of The Crossing. He's sober from alcohol and
Yes, I claim 2009, the NFC Championship game, the day when the Saints cheated to beat the Vikings and knock them out of the playoffs as my sobriety date. That was my last beer, so I claim victory over alcohol, pornography, and a whole slate of hard drugs that I used when I was younger.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you for joining us. And then we have Tammy, who's the ministry leader of Celebrate Recovery at Canyon Ridge, and she has recovery from sarcasm, anger.
I am in recovery for anger.
And sarcasm.
Yes.
I'm from New York. And so, I know there's two different types of sarcasm. So, all sarcasm?
All sarcasm. I had to let it go. And so it has been 12, it'll be 12 years in May.
Wow. I don't know. All right. And then, of course, we have Tay-Tay, who actually I learned more about Celebrate Recovery through her experience with attending Celebrate Recovery, and she's going to tell us a lot about her experience and even how Celebrate Recovery came to be. And then after the break, when we come back, we have somebody who's going to share about her own personal journey and experience with Celebrate Recovery. So stay tuned for that. So for now, we're just going to start off with Tay-Tay, who's going to share a little bit about how Celebrate Recovery came about and how she got exposed to it.
Yeah, so Celebrate Recovery started off as a sermon series at Saddleback Church. Rick Warren and Johnny Baker wrote it. It was just supposed to be like a weekend or like a 12-week weekend series type thing. And other churches started to adopt it, and it ended up being something that they decided they needed because of people that need to recover from things other than drugs and alcohol, and because of people in the church that feel that they need something where it's so God-based. And so the 12 steps of Celebrate Recovery have 12 biblical comparisons. And so each step has a biblical comparison that goes along with it. And then there's also 8 principles that go along with the program. And so they have, instead of, the way traditional recovery would do meetings and do, the steps through the big book, they have their own books, they have their own Bible, it's just a different way to do recovery. For me personally, I got sober in 2007, which we've talked about a lot, and I was one of those people that was scared of the God word. But I found in 2009, I found church for the first time in my life. I did not grow up in the church. I did not have a concept of God. I did not know any of those things. But from someone I knew in recovery that was also on the same journey as me, she was a pastor's kid, and so she brought me to church, and I started serving in the church and, finding this other way of life. Someone that I knew at the church, he was at the time the care pastor, and he was also over Celebrate Recovery at the time. And so he was like, hey, come to CR. And so I came to CR and I hated it. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. And then a few years later, a new care pastor, a new way of doing things. And he was like, hey, come fix the production at Celebrate Recovery. And I was like, oh, you want me to fix something? Let's do that. Next thing I know, I'm doing a step study, and I'm, working the steps that way, and I'm doing, different things. And so it became a part of my life for a really long season. And it was good. And it helped me explore different things. I had done a lot of long-term missions and stuff like that. And this was the next step for me. And so grounding me here in Vegas and, those kinds of things. But it was a great season, and then it ended, and I'm finding other ways of finding my path. But I love Celebrate Recovery, and I love that you have that, as someone that believes in the Bible, because I do, and somebody that believes in Jesus, because I do, I love that I have this other avenue. And, I have talked a lot about how, I do have a Bible degree. I don't always follow everything that the church says I should, but I do follow everything that I believe Jesus says I should. And so this, I feel like, is the program that gives me that opportunity to be who I am in recovery and in faith and true to myself authentically. And so I love Celebrate Recovery, and it's a great program, and I'm really excited about today's episode, if you can't tell.
Me too.
Just
Me
a little
too.
bit. You still
Yes.
go. You go to Celebrate Recovery.
I do.
events.
I don't go to Celebrate Recovery at Canyon Ridge anymore because it's far. I now live like 3 minutes from the crossing, so I have been finding myself there more often when I can be. And so yeah, I'm just really excited to get these people together today and introduce them to each other and let's do this. It's really cool.
All right. Okay, so Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in what you're doing now.
So, absolutely. My recovery story, I'm not going to tell you my recovery story today, but it's a two-piece
You can
recovery
tell
story.
some of it.
I'll tell little bits of it. I don't want to take up too much time with it. But so when I came to Christ, he started working on a couple things that I thought were totally victimless crimes, like pornography and my drinking, right? And we had a couple of conversations about, well, if you think it's a victimless crime, next time you sit down at your computer, look at some pornography, just pull up another chair next to you, because I'm God and I'm everywhere all the time, and you and I will just look at some pornography together. That was, the beginning and the end of my pornographic career right there. That was an uncomfortable reality to contemplate. And, we had kind of a similar conversation about alcohol and celebration and relaxation, right? So those challenges that I think more people think traditionally about when they think about recovery had been dealt with before I stepped into CR. I stepped into CR because it had fallen under my leadership umbrella, but I had a guy named Trey Jenkins who was doing a fantastic job of running it for me, so I would come and participate in the worship, because we all know CR worship is the best worship of all worships available, with all those humble, broken people in the room that are so grateful to be there. And they told me I had to go through a 12-step study if I was going to be able to lead in CR. And I did the standard pastoral thing. I said, well, I'll check that box. I'll participate in your step study since you say I have to.
I didn't even know his voice got lower.
But let's just be clear. I'm a pastor. I've been to seminary. I have a spiritual direction certificate. I've given up all my vices already. I don't need the 12-step study, which lasted for probably about 3 weeks of my sponsor just beat me on the head until I could finally look and see, man, I am an outrageously self-centered individual, and all the anxiety that I'm wrestling with doesn't come from fear that I'm not loving God enough or serving people around me enough. It's fear that I'm not managing how people perceive me well enough, and then continuing to go through that steps. Yeah, you're all nodding and right. That's the kind of reality you run into in a 12-step. And from there, it evolved into recognizing that I really wrestle with insecurity. My dad was a phenomenal man. Never said anything bad about hardly any people group, except for maybe folks who engaged in self-pity. He was fairly quick to condemn self-pity. So I've grown up my entire life abhorring self-pity. It's one of my biggest challenges. I've been soaking in self-pity for probably 35 or 40 years. And also an understanding that due to my insecurity, when people challenge me at all or even just try to give me help or direction, my immediate response is almost always judgment. So if you can imagine being a pastor, looking back over the 7 years of your career and looking at all the fantastic things that you've done, and recognize that the underlying motivation for a lot of that was trying to protect how people perceived you, and to go then back and look at all the times that you were judging folks rather than receiving their input and all that. I'm going to stop there, or else I will talk about myself for a while. But boy, it was a phenomenal bit of realization, and I can say, as someone who definitely doesn't need a 12-step study, man, I am so glad I participated in a couple of 12-step studies, because now my anxiety is pretty much under control, and I judge a lot less, and I'm at least aware of when I'm soaking in self-pity, so I can try and shorten that time frame as much as I can.
That's beautiful. I love that. I've often done the same thing, running the meeting space and the Recovery Star. I went from somebody who was someone who would slip into a traditional recovery event, and then I would slip back out, and I spent a lot of my time working from home, etc., on my other business that I had at the time. So when I was now in the forefront and a lot more people knew me, and I had to, it was much more of a challenge now to not have this special story, as some people would praise me for all the good I'm doing, and some people would be like, oh, she's just in it for money, and da-da-da-da. And it attacks all of the false self,
It really
ego,
does.
don't you know who I think I am, And so and that's not this exaggerated story about who I'm supposed to be with the cape coming out of my spine has nothing to do with God, but I used God to say that it had something to do with it because I'm doing this for God, don't you know? But at the end of the day, man, I'm an addict. You know, I want to manage how people see me too. And so I've always had to look at that constantly whenever something seems to excite me or I'm running on something or get anxiety because I have to live up to the story I have about myself. And we all have that. We can all identify with that.
I think you need recovery.
Yeah, thank you. I so appreciate it. You telling me all these years later.
Wow.
For sure.
So how'd you get involved with Celebrate Recovery in the first place?
Celebrate Recovery, it does fall under my ministry umbrella. So when I became the lead care pastor, that was when Celebrate Recovery came under my umbrella. And so, like I said, I paid a minimal amount of attention to it until I was forced fully into the process. And now it's rapidly become the focal point of what I do as a minister or as a pastor. It's just, for me, the community is, I guess I want to use the word intoxicating. That feels like the wrong word for this show, but it's to be surrounded by people who know they are broken,
Yes.
who are grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak without being interrupted or judged or helped or fixed, and who are thrilled to be there and will listen to me and not judge me, and to see the growth that happens in people. I mean, I don't know a word other than intoxicating. For me, it just feels like the best possible expression of church and what church could feel like.
Yes.
I
Right.
agree. That's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Yeah, right.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Everyone who walks in the door there is not there to impress their neighbor, or they're not meeting their friend from down the block or checking the church box. They're there for survival. They're there for improvement. They're there to see their brothers and sisters. They're there to see their
Community.
community. And it's,
Yeah.
I speak all the time about the divine magic of community. There's a reason we don't do recovery at home on our couches by ourselves, where it's safe. It's because it doesn't work. Right? It doesn't work outside of community. And in my experience, it really doesn't work without the involvement of God.
I agree. And I love how you're talking about it because a lot of times, people can have a story in their mind that talks them out of reaching out for help or trying something new.
Absolutely.
That tells them that that's going to be this, that's going to be that, all these ideas that we can tell ourselves. But you're painting this beautiful open-armed experience where come, be real, nobody's going to judge you, and this is a safe place to unpack your stuff and to look at it and get right with yourself.
It's messy there, Lisa. It's messy.
It's good though. It's a good messy.
It's a
good
fantastic.
messy.
Our production values aren't as high as big church, and sometimes I say stuff on stage, and I come off and I'm like, why did I say that? Or I get up there and I forget what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And, sometimes there's long pauses between the people when they come up on stage. We're not smooth.
Yeah.
We're not
that's good.
smooth,
I like
and
it.
I don't have any apologies for that. It's
Right.
it's just as real and authentic and vulnerable as it can be, and that's a rare commodity to find in this world, where you can show up and be stupid. There are times where that I'm emotionally unstable. I'm moody. I can be selfish sometimes, right? And people are like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're being a little selfish right now. Are you want, should we revisit this conversation maybe next week? I'm not sure this is really how you want to feel long term about this topic.
But it
Like,
keeps you humble because
so
you realize like it's your work in progress, and we're constantly having to make sure that we don't close back over the channel that's been open to our higher power to speak in our lives. It's our egos are wanting to always form back up and become super bloated and important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and then so you, Tammy, so you're at a different church across town.
Yes.
You're all the way north.
Northwest, yeah.
Northwest. So all this is in Las Vegas, by the way.
Yes.
But
And
there are CRs all over.
Yes,
Right.
all over the
Yeah.
world.
all over the world. And so,
Yes.
and how did you get involved?
I originally got involved in Celebrate Recovery as an assignment. So I was, I had been in church as an adult, serving as an associate pastor and in upwards of 15 years when I found Celebrate Recovery. And I was just church. Just the organized, the regimen of church, and I got an assignment as I was taking a church counseling class, and so our job as church counselors was to refer people to different resources, and Celebrate Recovery was one of those resources. And so we were assigned to go attend 2 sessions anytime during the time that we were going through this training. And I walked into that room, and it was just the most amazing gathering of church people I had ever seen. These people were so real and transparent and vulnerable, and like they knew that they were broken, and that they were working on that, and there wasn't any judgment. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what my problem is, but I know I have a problem, and I have to be, I have to stay in this place, because originally I
Thinking
kept
through your bag, what's the problem I could use for this? I need the problem.
I need to say a huge amen to everything that just came out of your mouth. I know I got a problem, so I need to stay here.
And I was supporting a family member, but I was just like, okay, no, whatever your issue is, that's fine, but I got to go find my own issues.
What's funny is at the beginning of Celebrate Recovery, I think a lot of the churches use this video now, the baggage video.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
actually done by Central like 15 years ago or something like that. Because like one of the kids in it is now an adult married with a kid. Like, so, like this video is from a long time ago, but it talks about baggage, and it talks about the different baggage we have, and how some of it's generational, and some, and it can be anything. And so when she's talking about that bag, it's like that baggage video where you're just like searching through the bag, and you're like carrying around this bag, and you're like, how do I get rid of this? And you pick it back up, and you put it down, and you pick it back up. And so, yeah, that's really cool.
Because I didn't have any issues, but I was going to find some just so I could stay in this room. People, I was like, I don't care. And what group am I going to? I don't know. I'm just going to try everyone until they're going to have to put me out. But this place, what they have, I need this. I didn't get this in 15 years of, opening the church, setting up, tearing down, serving people in that way. And then I came after just more digging. I found my fit, got in a couple of step studies. And then I found, having a relationship with Christ, I found that it deepened that relationship. Mm-hmm. And I was able to connect issues. I found that one of the tools that it provided for me I was like, oh my gosh, I am sarcastic. And this sarcasm was generational. And it was the reason why I was the only one of my siblings that got along with my dad, because he spoke sarcasm fluently.
That's good.
If he was awake and breathing, it was sarcasm. And that's literally how we made exchanges. But then when I went into my own home, I found that I had passed that on to my husband and my son, and that was the way that the house, it was so dysfunctional. Once my eyes were opened, I was like, it was so dysfunctional. And there was one person that had taught me that sarcasm hurts everyone. Mm-hmm. It's like, you have win, lose, win, win, but it's a lose-lose situation, and it's not pleasing to God. And so when I figured that out, I was like, yo, I don't want to do this anymore. I got to drop this thing. And then everything that was connected to it. And it turned out that sarcasm was my means of processing anger. Mm-hmm. So that helped me get to the root of things. And man, since the time I was, I have a letter that documents my mom having a conversation with me. And she's like, Tammy, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I look at 5 years old, I tell my mom, I just want to be me. And it turns out that that's literally the theme of my life, that, I want to be able to be transparent, vulnerable, and just authentically me. And it was a place where I could do that, flaws and all, and not feel judged. So it was just absolutely amazing. And what's even greater than that is it taught me, Celebrate Recovery taught me the true meaning of grace. The way that Jesus meant it, because also in those 15 years of being a church person, like I was extremely judgmental. I was extremely judgmental. And Celebrate Recovery just taught me it was the living example of grace.
Yes.
And so, I learned how to extend grace to others as well as myself. And so I'm so grateful for that program.
I'm grateful you guys are sharing like this because, like I said, like the general consensus when somebody has an aversion to organized religion, especially Christianity, is the judgmental story, the hell and damnation God, and then the people judging, and then not being the incongruency with how they are maybe on a Sunday, but then how they are when they get behind the wheel on the road after, and et cetera.
Right.
And these are the stories that you hear
Right.
in traditional 12-step recovery that keep a person going with this resentment, this grudge against a whole modality, right? And and that's it turns a person off who might be curious about it, but when we have these ideas that religion is like that, and then there are other paths, because thank God, literally, there are many paths to God. Whatever you end up even calling, you don't even end up having to call it God, as long as the experience is legitimately that experience where you're connected. But the story is that it's going to be judgmental. Like, there's no way that a church will accept somebody like me. The things I've done, the things that were done to me, no way, blah, blah, blah. And the whole issue that keeps a person even disconnected from their higher power for so long is the story that God's judging them and God would judge them. And it's definitely the organized religion God that would judge them. And so it keeps them in a rift where they have to heal that sense of abandonment, that shame, that toxic shame, And to see the way you guys are painting this is so beautiful, because you don't have to, there's no airs to put on, there's no fancy dress to wear, and you don't have to clean it all up and make it seem like it's anything. You can bring whatever it is that you're going through.
Amen.
And please bring whatever it is you're going through. And on the topic of sarcasm, I when I was early in recovery, somebody said that and I don't know if this is true because I've tried to look this word up before, but they said that the definition of sarcasm was the tearing of flesh. Did you ever hear that as a definition?
Ooh.
It's very vivid. And so I grew up in New York, and sarcasm is like, if you don't know how to drive and you don't know how to speak in sarcasm, you don't belong in New York. And so, but what I saw that there was the sarcasm that's bad is the passive aggressive. I want to tell you how I feel about you, and then I want to chastise you for not taking the joke.
Yes.
I want to slip it to you, but I want to take responsibility for having said that. That's not what I really think. You're too sensitive. Whatever it is, that sarcasm it's a way of getting the message across, without having to own it. And by learning, and by taking responsibility and getting right with ourselves and God, it's like we can clear that up and realize that, I don't want to make you the reason why I'm suffering. I don't want to do that, because that's not even cute. But I do like the humor sarcasm where everybody's in on the joke.
Yeah.
So either I'm in denial and I need to go do what she's doing, or
I am teaching on denial tonight.
you are? Oh, there you go.
Our Midtown campus.
There'll be a whole
Feel
different
free to
episode
show
next
up.
time.
Feel free to show up.
So one thing I wanted to say about what you were talking about with the God concept and this damning God or whatever, we've talked a little bit about my journey in the last few years and how there were points that I was afraid to tell people in the church what was really going on in my life, and and I have not had any bad, no one has said to me you're going to hell because of who you love. No one has said that to me. And what's interesting is I've started going to the Crossing CR, and they don't know me there, so they don't know that I did production for many years, and they don't know that
They know now.
They do know because she tells
They
everybody.
didn't know.
I hear you volunteering to be in the tech booth.
I heard that.
Well, if you allow me to, but that's a different conversation. But they didn't know
That's
that
hilarious.
they didn't know the history, But Dan and I had a conversation because I was like, hey, I really want to openly share in this group, but I can't tell them who I love because they might try to fix me, And he was like, then they try to fix you, but they're wrong, like it, and like this like opening of like
Let that be their problem.
let that be their problem, and even before we just started this shoot, like we were talking about. Because I have a Bible degree too. Like, he's not the only one in the room with a Bible degree.
Ooh.
And she's a reverend, so, like, Lisa's a reverend,
Reverend Lisa.
Yeah.
All right. I'll make the adjustment.
God.
But so, we were talking about how, like, there are allowances in God's kingdom for, interpretation even. And, how like just me being authentic me and loving God the way that I do is enough. Like, I don't have to be this perfect Christian in order to be someone who gets recovery from Celebrate Recovery.
Right.
And so I appreciate that. Like, I appreciate that idea that like I can come broken and I can come where this person thinks I'm broken, but that's not actually broken for me, And I love that idea. I love that take on it. And so I'm just really appreciative of like the openness that I'm finding now in Celebrate Recovery, and that I was afraid I wouldn't find. But that's because I had my own preconceived notions, not because anybody told me that I wouldn't find it there, And so
Thank you.
that opening of like, okay, so I can be me and still heal.
I feel like it's, I think it's ironic that, that all of these methods to get in touch with a higher power are they themselves worshipped. Like, if I just go to church, or if I just say these prayers, or if I just do this thing, in and of itself is this magic potion. I will be healed, I will be all the good, and I will go to heaven. And instead, it's the thing that, because we're living up here, and we're thinking, I have to be good, and that person's not good, and do you see what that person's doing, and I need to do this better, and I should be, and whatever, and we have all these stories about who we think we're supposed to be, and that is the biggest block to our true relationship with each other and with God, period.
Mm-hmm.
Is the story about it. And so what's so wonderful is sometimes you would think that we had this guy outside the meeting space for an obnoxious amount of time. And he was preaching, with the whole, what do you call it, megaphone? Megaphone.
Oh, goodness. Really?
And he was doing it, and he was telling everybody. And so I went out there and maybe had a little sarcasm, but I went out there and I said, I really appreciate how devoted you are to what you're doing, but we're good over here. Like, we're healing. We have higher powers. Like, maybe your services would be better effective on another corner, right? Because he's loud and we have the meetings and whatever. And so I thought, who I thought I was going to fix that. But he said, "Oh no, that's the wrong God. That's not God." Those people. And he started going about like the people who are addicts and the people who, and I was just like, wow.
You mean the people Jesus actually went after?
Yeah. So what's interesting about the moment, right, is I walked away realizing that he's doing all the things that he very much feels his mission to do, and I honor him for that. Mm-hmm. But he's missing the point. He's missing this point, right? Because if there was anybody that couldn't get right with themselves, they couldn't heal, they couldn't be God, they couldn't be with God. If that was even a thing. And I think that it is the person that gets judged for bottoming from alcohol, drugs. Oh my God, that person lost their kids right now. They lost their job, da-da-da. They think that person's a criminal, that person went to jail, yada, yada. That they're the unlovable, they're the unforgivable, or for whatever, there's judgments, right? But it's in that bottoming from trying to be on all the time. It's that awakening from like finally getting real and letting go and saying, finally, I don't have to pretend anymore. This is what's really going on. And there's this exhale and this surrender, and it says, I have this problem, I really want a solution. And it's that mindset, that surrendered mindset, that is the closest to God that person has been yet, maybe. Right? Whereas the person who's judging is not even experiencing that surrender in that moment.
Do you hear the power in your voice? Or do you all hear the power in her voice when she talks about finally getting to be who I am?
Yeah.
The power in that. I mean, it just comes through from your diaphragm.
Yeah, because that's where it's from, like who we are at the core, being able to speak the truth rather than living in this, I got to be on, I got to protect, I got to this, all, and we could do that even in recovery. The person who has long-term recovery, who is so afraid to admit that they want to kill themselves, or the person who's been in church, serving even, who doesn't want to admit that they have something going on, know. But this Celebrate Recovery, it's so beautiful, the picture that you guys have painted of it that says, hey, come as you are.
Yeah.
Right?
And a perfect example of that is that whole self-pity thing. Like I had said, my dad taught me to abhor self-pity. I couldn't see it in myself. I was completely blind to it until I spent 6 months in an environment where I was free to be myself. Broken, messed up, moody, judgmental, whatever it was. And people loved me anyway. Just to add a little bit more weight to what the two of you said, if folks have had that negative religious experience, I would say at least a couple of things to them. Yeah, there are churches out there that are not going to treat you well. Man, try another church. My church is fantastic. Your church is fantastic, right? And I would say show up to CR. My CR, your CR, a CR, and taste and see.
Yeah.
Come and taste and see and find out. And you know what? You may get someone who judges you there. I'm not saying all of the people who show up at my CR or your CR or any other CR are perfect every single week. That's why we beg and plead with people to come back 6 weeks in a row.
Yeah.
Because you're going to catch a resentment or something with someone.
Yeah, but we judge people because we judge ourselves.
Absolutely.
We judge people because we have the stupid stories that we have in our mind about who we think we're supposed to be, no matter who we got it from.
Absolutely.
Society, advertising, our parents, other kids.
Yeah.
Imagination.
So you may run into one or two people there who do try to judge you or fix you or counsel
But
you.
forgive them. They know not what they do.
Give them
They
grace.
know not
That's
what
part of their
they
recovery
do.
process as well. Because
Amen.
that don't judge, don't fix, don't counsel. We refer to our DNA, right? The hardcore rules that we have to follow. We read them out at the beginning of every open share group.
Yes.
You cannot interrupt this person. You also can't judge them. And my personal favorite is you can't fix them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? We will call people out for trying to fix people. Don't.
Right.
You're
Yes.
fixing. Stop that. Just listen.
One thing I love about the Crossing CR is they say, be kind but not weird. And if somebody's not a hugger, don't try to hug them. It makes me so happy.
That's because she doesn't like hugs. She doesn't like hugs. Yeah. But thank you so much for joining us. So what's the address of your church that you...
We meet on Mondays, 5:30 for dinner, 6:30 for the main program at our Windmill campus, which is 7950 West Windmill Lane. That's Buffalo and Windmill. And we meet Wednesdays, 5:30 for dinner, 6:30 for the main program at our Midtown campus, which is 3535 West Sahara and Valley View.
Oh, perfect. Okay, and the hours and location of yours?
So Friday night dinner is at 5:45, 6. The main program doors open for the main program at 6:30. We start at 6:45. We're at Canyon Ridge, 6200 West Lone Mountain Road.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful. We're going to have to go to break now. And please remember that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them, don't represent any 12-step program, or should replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. See you in a bit. Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. Please remember you can watch us on Facebook, YouTube, on Amazon Fire TV. You can listen to us on the PHLV radio app. You can get our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. You can go to themeetingspace.com and click on The Real Recovery Show, and you can see all of our episodes there as well. And please pass it on to anybody that you think might be interested and help us get the word out. So before the break, we talked a lot about Celebrate Recovery, how it came about, and the people that run it. And right now we're going to share with Steph, who's a member of Celebrate Recovery. She's in recovery for PTSD, and her entire family had found recovery, including her kids, with Celebration Place, which is a pre-recovery. And now she is the worship leader of Celebrate Recovery at her church. And so please do share how you came about. How did you even find out about Celebrate Recovery?
So I had been attending Canyon Ridge at the time for about 5 years, and I served in ministry volunteering with Tay, and she invited me to hear her testimony on her sober date. And I'm like, okay, I'll go there on like stealth mode. Like, I don't want anyone to see me. So I walked in like all quiet, like, not an addict. Hi, not an addict. I'm just here to support a friend. And I walked in, and her story was so powerful and amazing, and it really moved me. But I didn't come back the next week because it wasn't for me. And
It was for those people.
It was for those people, those people who were messed up and, messed up, sorry to say in quotes, because I was really in denial at the time. And I was serving at a satellite campus of Canyon Ridge at the time with Tay, and she just kept saying, like, you can come back. It would be a great place for you. And I'm like, no, I don't have problems. I didn't have any experience with traditional recovery. No one in my family had experience with traditional recovery. So I really didn't know much about that. So as far as I was concerned, I didn't have an addiction per se. So I didn't need to come. And my husband and I had both really struggled with depression, like on the down low. Like, neither of us really knew that the other was struggling, and had like a major, I guess you would say, crossroads in our marriage. And I ended up having like a traumatic event that happened that I really realized I needed help. I couldn't do it just with God. I didn't know how to ask him for help because that wasn't what our relationship had been before. And I remember just like, I felt like I crawled into Celebrate Recovery. It was August of 2018, and just sobbed my whole way up to get that blue chip that first time. And I remember Tay, I don't even think I told you I was coming.
No,
I
no
just
idea.
showed up with my husband, and the rest is history. I never left. I didn't even know why I was really coming the first time I went, but I stayed for the like introductory meeting at the end for the new beginners, and then the next week started going to share groups. Immediately, like every single week, was there trying to figure out what my issue was, because I knew I had them. I just didn't know which. And I remember every single week when we say who we are and what we're there to struggle with, every week I added a new thing. I'm like, oh, there's a new thing, like, and we're not supposed to crosstalk, so people would say things and I would like keep like a mental note, like, oh, let me add that to my list of things, because I just had never dealt with any of those things before. And it was like taking the mask off, and I could finally admit out loud in front of a room full of people who couldn't crosstalk, who couldn't fix me, oh, I have issues. Like, and it's okay to say I have issues. And I remember it was just like being able to have this conversation, like my relationship with Tay could change because we actually had this in common. Like, we weren't just like, I wouldn't say we were ever surface level, but it was like we had God and that part of our relationship, but now we could talk this recovery life, and we had these things in common. And I realized, like, I didn't have to have an addiction per se to find a home here. And it changed my life. It changed my marriage. It changed my family, how I parent, how I carry on relationships with friends, with my parents. It's completely changed my world. And I'm forever grateful.
And the way your kids
For
deal with
real.
situations.
And that's the thing is, like, my husband and I both ended up completing our first 12-step study at the end of 2019, and then the pandemic happened. And honestly, we both say, like, openly that we're not sure that our marriage would have survived the pandemic. And I can say I might not have survived, because I was struggling with suicidal ideation after the birth of my second child in 2017, and I had not really ever told anyone. It went completely untreated for 9 months because Christians don't say they struggle with suicidal thoughts.
not at all.
You don't do that. Like, you just don't. That's the most selfish thing you could ever do,
Yeah.
is to take yourself away from your family. And so having that, like, internal conflict, like, okay, but I'm not saying I want to kill myself, but I've thought about it, like, and realizing, like, that it was okay to say that out loud. And it didn't make me love God less. It didn't make me love my family less. And I could say that out loud. And so being able to have those tools that I learned through the 12 steps and through the 8 principles, and to back all of that up with the scripture that all of it is founded upon, really helped me cope. It helped me to understand and also identify other issues that I had that I didn't realize I had. And so, I mean, really, Celebrate Recovery, like, helped in so many ways, and it just made my relationship with God so much stronger. And I'm really grateful for that, and grateful for people who were bold enough to tell me that I maybe needed a little or a lot of help, like Tay-Tay did. And yeah, she scared me, but it was also extremely refreshing to have someone who could see in me that I could find freedom, and that I didn't need to keep that mask of perfection that I thought I always needed to have, and that I could let it all down, and there would be a room full of people there to not only cheer me on, but understand and pray for me and support me. And it has just been completely transformative. And with my kids too, because my kids were able to see my husband and I change radically, especially my older daughter, who's now 10. She saw the mom who previously could barely keep it together, and who couldn't, who was so riddled with anxiety and fear and this, like, unrealistic expectation of perfection, not only for myself but for her.
Right.
And I wasn't willing to see my own flaws or my own mental illness for what it was, not realizing that she is just like me in so many ways. So when I started to acknowledge it's okay to not be perfect, I became a much better mom.
Absolutely.
I became a much better partner, and it just changed everything. And to where now, like, if you looked at me, you know, when my daughter was 5 and under versus who I am and who she is now, she is an individual that I just embrace it. And I love that in her. And it's also helped me to see all of those things in myself, and to recognize, I know a big part of my story is the whole, like Psalm 139, I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So that is huge in how I view myself, my kids, my husband, and so that's big. It has made me a better mom, and made my kids understand themselves.
Because all of this dysfunction goes generation to generation to generation.
Yeah.
I don't care if people ever drink, ever take a pill, anything. If there's a don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, gotta look good, gotta be perfect, can't let anybody see that you have a feeling. You know, like Dan was saying, you know, nobody can feel sorry for themselves. You can't feel your feelings and show that you have something really going on, because you have to fit into the model of what you're supposed to look like. And meanwhile, we're dying inside.
For sure.
You know, and so it doesn't even. And then what happens is that the children that grow up in an environment like that, even if everybody's nice to everybody, there's no real true humility and comfortability in being able to feel feelings and talk about what's really going on and have doubts and have questions and be able to recognize that of course they're going to make mistakes and of course they're going to think things. And you know, I mean, one of the things I love about Tay is that she recovers out loud. You know, when she was working at the recovery store in the beginning, every time somebody had a question about Celebrate Recovery in any way, shape, or form, I'd be like, Tay, and Tay would come out, because she would be willing to just share so openly about the experience so that somebody can imagine themselves in it and see if that would work for them. And if we don't get real with ourselves and God and get real with others, even if we don't say ever a mean thing to another person, the energy in the room, the interaction that we have with them doesn't give permission to anyone to be real. And when everybody's trying to be these perfect little people, and they think that that's what their concept of a higher power would like, them being fake. You know, secretly judging, secretly having the self-shame, the shame, secretly separating, you know. It's like, that is, I think, you could be in the actual building for it, the church itself, and not have the experience. So I love what you were sharing. So what happens, you guys, when somebody goes and wants to inquire about Celebrate Recovery? If they go for their first time, like, what can somebody expect, or what tips or tools can you maybe give somebody on this is the easiest way to get involved in it and to try it out?
Show up.
Just show up.
Show up.
So, but there is the dinner. I mean, it starts with dinner. Every Celebrate Recovery
Is
has
it free?
an awkward dinner.
Is it a free awkward dinner?
It is it is in most cases a free awkward dinner.
They take donations.
They accept donations. Yeah, because we don't want anyone to come and not be able to eat. So
it's like a mingle. Do people sit down for dinner?
Yes, people sit down. We break bread together.
And for some people, it's the only meal a week they get to have with their families.
Yes.
Because of life, because of how busy life can be.
So, but if somebody's new, is there a greeter? Is there somebody that recognizes when people are new? I mean, how's the process?
There is. There are greeters throughout. There's wayfinders, signs that point you to the dinner, point you to the chapel, and everyone there, like. One of the things that people tend to fear is like, oh, I'm going to stand out. People know that I'm new. And we try to make a habit of not saying, oh, hey, you're new. We try and make them feel welcome. And by just saying, welcome to Celebrate Recovery, what brings you here? How'd you find us? As opposed to just saying, hey, here's the new guy.
But also giving direction to, like, if you have kids, to Celebration Place, or if you have a middle school or high school kid, the Landing, because there's different programs for the different ages.
At the same time, so like when you guys have your dinner and then everybody, like the kids go to one room and the parents go to another room, or what happens?
Well, dinner and basically at the end dessert is designed for the families to come together. But there is a place, there's childcare for up to 6th grade, and then the teens come in the main meeting with us, and then when the parents break out for large group, they separate into their own groups as well.
And so somebody can come, they can just listen, right? Nobody's gonna make them do anything, right? You can just try it out. It can't hurt. And check it out for yourself.
And it starts with worship. Like the big group is, it starts with worship. It does like chips and readings and stuff like that, like you would find in a regular meeting. There's more worship, and then there's a teaching. And that's all
Or a
part of a large group,
testimony.
or
Yeah,
a testimony.
Yes.
So it goes. So one week there's a teaching, the next week there's a testimony, and it goes back and forth.
And a testimony is somebody sharing their story.
Kind of like what
overcoming.
Stephanie just did. And then after that, that's when they break off into the smaller groups. And depending on the CR, depends on what groups they offer, because it depends on how many volunteers they have to run the groups. So, but there's like addiction, there's codependency, there's life issues.
Yes.
Some have veterans,
Yes.
some have abuse. I mean, so there's all these different groups, but the large group is co-ed, where the small groups are gender specific, issue specific.
Oh, wow. That you can have that many groups. That's crazy.
Yes.
And do you have sponsorship, like in
Yes.
traditional? And how does that work?
In order to be a sponsor, one, you have to have some years of recovery under your belt, but you have to have at least gone through one Celebrate Recovery step study and gone through what the sponsor training is.
And so, and what she says when she says the Celebrate Recovery 12-step study, so there's sets of books, and it's like a separate meeting. It's a different day, and you do it in a group. So there's the first set of books, and then there's the Journey Continues, which is the second set of books. And so you have to go through that first set of books at least once and do the training to be a Celebrate Recovery sponsor.
Interesting. And so, is it like with traditional recovery where the sponsor stays in touch with the sponsee in between meetings, or is it just really mainly there?
Oh, no. Sponsorship is really what happens outside of the meetings. And pretty much most across the board, the way that sponsors are designed in Celebrate Recovery is we set up a theme of accountability, where it is the person being sponsored, their responsibility to reach out to their sponsor. But if a sponsor hasn't heard from someone they're sponsoring in a while, they'll check in, ask questions, but it really puts responsibility on
I agree
the person
with that,
being
because even in
sponsored.
traditional recovery, there's sometimes you'll have somebody who's a sponsee. He'll be like, my sponsor doesn't call me. It's like that's not their job,
job.
like
No, it's not their job.
because you have
Not
to
their
you have to
recovery.
show that you're willing to do your part and take your own healing and your own recovery seriously.
Gotta have skin in the game.
Yeah.
So how many people do you feel go to Celebrate Recovery instead of traditional, and how many people maybe do both? Do you have any kind of idea of the mix of that?
I would say it's probably percentage wise, it's probably even, because a large percentage of Celebrate Recovery participants participate in traditional recovery as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who treat the Celebrate Recovery as their church experience while they're going to Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous too, so that they get, it's kind of cool because then they have a sponsor there, and then they have a sponsor there, and so they have all the recovery.
Well, and here we have a larger population of people that Celebrate Recovery for addiction, especially alcohol, drugs, and gambling, than in other places. I don't remember what the percentage is, but what's the percentage of people that go for addiction? Isn't it like 50% or? It's less.
I don't even
yeah.
know what the current percentages are.
But because Celebrate Recovery does such a wide gamut of any hurt, habit, or hang up, I think I said that in the wrong order, but
What's the right order?
Hurt, hang up, habit.
Hurt leads to a hang up,
yeah.
which can lead
Hurt,
to a
hang
habit.
up, yeah. Whatever.
Tay taught me that because she was a stickler for the order. I didn't care. As long as I got all the H's out, it didn't matter.
That's really cool. That's really cool too, because a lot of times when somebody goes to a specific 12-step program, like Alcoholics Anonymous, they go for alcohol and maybe some drugs, but maybe they also have sex addiction, maybe they also have workaholism, maybe they also have
Eating disorders,
etc. And maybe they're just sticking to that one program and trying to apply all of it to it. And obviously, alcohol is only mentioned in the first step, so it's all applicable to all the things that are blocking us from the sunlight of the spirit, so to speak. But to go to a place and say, hey, so why don't we take a little bit of a deep dive and look at where we might have some other things? It's much more everything everything involved in it. There's an actual program, I believe it's called Recovery Anonymous, or Recovery Anonymous. They use the original manuscript of the big book for Alcoholics Anonymous, and they apply it to every affliction, every addiction, everything, and they just take them through the big book that way. It's not really a very large program. It never really, in my opinion, as far as, sizes of programs, it never really fully took off, but this feels like it has more of like an inclusivity of all the different things that could be wrong. So, but thank you so much for coming and sharing about this, because Lord knows you're going to help the people that are curious about it, even if they're in 12-step or they're curious about it, or they go to church but they have issues and they want to just go to church to fix their issues, but they're maybe not having, where they have the work and the tools and the people to help them to be able to really apply the principles that they're learning in church to their life. So thank you so much for everybody, and thank you for joining us today on the Real Recovery Show. We'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor and gracious host, PHLB Radio, here in Las Vegas. See you next week.